Echoes on the Red Horizon. A special book project with Create and Learn. By Anastasia Spiehler. Introduction. Embark on an exciting space odyssey that will take you from Kennedy Space Center to the desolate landscapes of Mars in Echoes on the Red Horizon by Anastasia Spiehler. Join a crew of intrepid astronauts as they venture to the Red Planet in a quest to unlock its secrets and pave the way for the colonization of the solar system. Echoes on the Red Horizon offers a prophetic glimpse into a future where humanity's survival hinges on establishing a permanent human presence on Mars, representing real-world aspirations as well as the hazards of space exploration, including from artificial intelligence. As we stand on the brink of a revolution in human space travel, Anastasia Spiehler's narrative foretells some of the trials and triumphs that may await us. You are invited to come along for the journey. Bruce Callow. Santa Ana, Costa Rica. March, 2024. Mission context. The year is 2058 and NASA and its partners want to colonize Mars to expand habitable territory and help decrease global conflict. There would be less population on Earth competing for territory and resources. We are going to Mars to discover if the soil is compatible for us to grow crops there. Will there be plant mutations we can adapt for growing crops on Earth? Will animals be adaptable to living on Mars? The mission aims to bring back a large amount of Mars soil to experiment with and use to grow plants back on Earth. Crew members. Adam Hobb, Australian, Commander, 40 years old. Brooke Hansley, Icelander, Chief Engineer, 32 years old. Colin Falcon, American, Science Officer, 30 years old. Atlas the rover. She uses holographic images to communicate. Atlas uses her personalities to manage the crew. This rover is an official member of the crew under the direct command of Brooke Hansley. Chapter 1, Letters and Introductions. Letters were sent out to hopeful astronauts for the mission to Mars. Brooke was sitting at home drinking hot chocolate when there was a knock on the door. She opened it with curiosity to find a gentleman asking for her signature on a registered letter. She quickly signed for it and went back to sipping her hot chocolate in her living room. She had an idea of what was in the letter but was nervous to open it. She finished her cup of hot chocolate, and finally decided to read the letter. Dear Brooke. You have been chosen to go to Mars on the international mission to collect soil samples and help with the beginning of colonization on Mars. Your engineering degree and experience are remarkable, and we believe you will be an asset to complete this mission safely and successfully. Please report immediately to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, USA. Kind regards. Bruce Manor, Chief NASA Scientist. Brooke was shocked and excited. She spent the next few days packing and preparing for the flight to leave home. She had spent her entire life in Iceland other than the 4 years she spent at university in London to earn her engineering degree. Brooke spent almost 3 years doing a Mars simulation in Iceland with rovers examining how they would work in the Martian terrain and extreme Martian weather. She decided to pack her swimsuit just in case she needed it while in Florida. Before she knew it, she was on a 9-hour flight from Keflavik Airport in Iceland to Orlando, Florida on her way to the Kennedy Space Center for training. The next thing she knew, she was walking up the stairs to the entrance of the Kennedy Space Center. She opened the doors, and she saw 2 men talking to a group of what looked to be NASA scientists. They all turned when they heard the doors open, and the group of scientists smiled at her, but the 2 men only stared. At that moment, she knew that for some reason she had a bad feeling about one of the men staring at her. Introductions were started. The first man said, "G'day, my name is Adam Hobb, and I'm the commander of this mission. When I'm not boxing kangaroos, you can find me swimming at Bondi Beach." Haha, just a joke. Brooke could tell that Adam was Australian by his accent. The second man laughed slightly at Adam's joke before introducing himself. "Hello, my name is Colin. I'm from California, so I am quite used to the sunny weather. I am going to be the science officer for this mission. It's nice to meet you," he said before flashing a sheepish smile at everyone. Brooke knew it was time to introduce herself, so she said, "Hello, my name is Brooke and I'm happy to be here. I am from Iceland. I am the chief engineer for this Mars mission, and I'm happy to be here." She was interrupted by Adam. Must be chilly in Iceland. He smiled at Brooke as she glared slightly at him before speaking. It is quite cold there. I doubt you'd be able to handle that, she said with a hint of anger in her voice. Adam just laughed and smirked at her while Colin looked away. Brooke already knew who she had reservations about from the group here. Brooke sighed as the group of scientists stared at her. I'm glad to meet you too, she said. Happy to meet you too, Brooke, Adam said as Colin opened his mouth to speak but didn't say anything. How about we get to the training since our introductions are done, a scientist from the group said as they walked, turning around to make sure we were following. Chapter 2, Explosions and Hours. Colin, Adam, and Brooke were following the group of scientists to a few rooms. The scientists had us meet a group of NASA trainers. 3 of them led Colin to a lab, then said to him, Colin, you are required to mix the 2 liquids that are given to you and analyze what new kind of mixture you have made. Colin did this and thought, I am going to mess up so badly. What if something bad happens and I fail this and they yell and kick me out of this training and I never get to do anything that involves my dream about being in space? Colin got past the thought, quickly mixing the 2 liquids until it all went crashing down. Boom. Suddenly Colin was blown back slightly, which was lucky, because he would have been burned by the flames that now flashed around the room. The 3 NASA trainers ran to get help, which caused a beaker of water to spill. Colin quickly got to his feet and ran, his ears were ringing and his head throbbed with pain. This was the worst headache he ever had in his life. Colin knew he had to push through the pain before tripping on the water from the beaker. The pain from his left ankle shot up his leg, but he still knew he had to get over it as he stood, running out of the room away from the smoke. More people ran past him and behind to put out the fire. After a bit they put it out, but Colin now lay on the floor before slowly passing out. Suddenly Colin was blown back slightly, which was lucky, because he would have been burned by the flames that now flashed around the room. The 3 NASA trainers ran to get help, which caused a beaker of water to spill. Colin quickly got to his feet and ran, his ears were ringing and his head throbbed with pain. This was the worst headache he ever had in his life. Colin knew he had to push through the pain before tripping on the water from the beaker. The pain from his left ankle shot up his leg, but he still knew he had to get over it as he stood, running out of the room away from the smoke. More people ran past him and behind to put out the fire. After a bit they put it out, but Colin now lay on the floor before slowly passing out. Adam was busy doing simulations about taking their spaceship through the asteroid belt before a NASA trainer walked over and abruptly stopped the simulations. You aren't going through the asteroid belt for this mission. Come with me to the EVA training, he said before grabbing Adam's arm and taking him to the EVA practice area. He didn't like rehearsing EVAs, because well, they weren't as fun as piloting a ship through asteroids, and this EVA was so boring and tiring. Adam had guessed it was about 7 to 8 hours to put on this new suit they had designed for this Mars mission about collecting soil, and another 3 to 4 hours just to complete this EVA. Adam was so tired and somewhat grumpy that after he took off the suit, which was another 2 to 3 hours, he walked to his new bedroom and rested in the bed, hearing some screams in the distance that he didn't really care about right now. Soon he fell asleep for about 2 hours. Chapter 3, The Ultimate Countdown to Mars. Brooke, Adam, and Colin were meeting up in the main lobby that had a design engineer and 2 microbiologists and 2 NASA trainers standing in front of them. What are we doing? Adam asked in a slightly annoyed tone of voice. The first scientist stepped up and said, we are introducing you to your new rover companion. As Brooke squealed in joy and Colin looked at the floor nervously. Really? We are working with a rover, Brooke yelled in joy as the trainers brought in a deactivated rover and set it down. They pressed a button which activated the rover. The rover slowly looked up at everyone and stared at them with its small squarish, glazed over eyes before rolling over to Adam, Colin, and Brooke. Hello, I am Atlas, your new rover companion, and ready to serve you all with almost anything, Atlas said with a plain, monotone voice. All right. Brooke and Adam. You'll be going to train with Atlas, and Colin will be coming to the lab with us to mix more liquids and examine what kind of plants would work well in soil. We have plants that we have been setting up in the lab for months for you to examine their growth. Let's go now. The two trainers took Brooke, Adam, and Atlas to their training area, and the three scientists took Colin to the lab. Colin was happy to be away from Atlas. Brooke, Atlas, the two trainers and Adam were standing in a courtyard. Okay, we're going to show you what Atlas can do. Its abilities are holograms such as. The first trainer looked at Atlas as her eyes changed to a bluish color before showing a hologram of a 6 feet 3 inches girl. Adam stared in shock and Brooke smiled. That's awesome, Brooke said as Adam looked at her. Doubt it can box kangaroos like me, Adam said with a smirk as Brooke glared at him. Atlas can do more than make a human form of itself. Show them Atlas. The rover replaced the hologram with a large detailed map of Mars and Earth with multiple tasks next to the Mars map. Whoa! This is great. Now I can actually look at something better than Adam's face on the ship, Brooke laughed and Adam gasped in anger. I think my face is wonderful. He argued as Brooke continued laughing. Cool it down, you two. We don't want fights on the spaceship. Atlas turned off the hologram and scanned Brooke and Adam. Analysis on crew member Brooke, age, 32, full name, Brooke Hansley. Icelander. Analysis on crew member Adam, age, 40, full name, Adam Hobb, Australian. Brooke blinked in shock and Adam frowned. These should be most of the rover's functions for now. You two may start your training. Brooke and Adam started asking tons of questions that Atlas and the two trainers answered. Colin was in the lab after mixing two liquids to make some kind of substance that was thought to be healthy for the plants he was going to study. Colin followed the scientists to 4 plants in different areas of soil. Okay Colin, examine these 4 plants. Colin looked at each of them and noticed how 2 of the plants were a bit brown and drooped down. He looked at the soil and saw that one was full of rocks that the roots had to move past or couldn't go too far in the soil, and the other was terribly dry and the roots were shrunk down and the plant didn't look too good. The other 2 were well grown with great looking roots and leaves. I think the 2 with the rocky and dry soil aren't going to live, the scientist nodded. How about you try using the substance we made on the plants? They asked before Colin poured half of the liquid into one and the rest into the other. The plant's roots somehow turned a bit greener as it absorbed the substance. Whoa! I should keep some of this for the flowers I've been trying to grow at home. Colin smiled. The rest of Colin's training was about talking about how the plants would grow and stuff. About 3 hours later the 3 had time to rest and talk. So how was your training? Colin said, it was awesome. We trained with Atlas and she has holograms and tons of storage and this cool claw thing she uses to grab stuff. Brooke squealed and Adam shrugged. I think Atlas is cool too, I guess, he said, looking at his hands. What do you think, Colin? Adam said as Colin frowned slightly and looked down. I don't really like Atlas. I think she's creepy, Colin said nervously as Brooke blinked. Atlas is great. She can do so much to help us on Mars. Brooke smiled as she said this. The 3 continued talking until they all fell asleep. The next day was now here as the crew was woken up by trainers and asked to put their spacesuits on, which they did and again took 7 to 8 hours. They did lots of checks on the suits before giving the crew a bit to prepare for this. Are we ready to do this? Adam said. Yes. I guess. Brooke and Colin said at the same time. We got this, guys. I believe in us, Adam said and smiled as the trainers and scientists walked in and led us to the spaceship. As the 3 of us entered, Brooke saw Atlas already here in a corner as she rolled up to them. Welcome to the ship, Brooke, Adam, and Colin, she said in a somewhat happy voice. Everyone sat down and Atlas went into a compartment in the corner. Once everyone was settled, Mission Control gave the ship a few quick checks before starting the countdown. Launching in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, Brooke laughed in joy, Adam smirked as he stared ahead, Colin hugged himself slightly as the ship rumbled. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And blast off. The ship rumbled a lot more now before shooting upwards into the sky towards Mars. Chapter 4, Navigating the Cosmic Storm. Brooke, Adam, Colin, and Atlas were flying off into space. It took about 3 hours to officially get into space. Colin heard a loud pop and sudden pain before starting to cry and somewhat scream in pain. Brooke quickly turned to stare at him while Adam didn't really care. Colin, what's wrong? Brooke questioned, glancing at Adam as he hopped out of his seat to explore and wandered over to Altos, attempting to activate her but failing. Why is it not activating, Brooke? Adam stared at her. Can't you see I'm trying to help Colin? She thought for a moment. Or, I could have Atlas help. She stood and walked over to Adam and the deactivated rover, opening a panel and typed in a code. Atlas beeped for a moment before raising her head to stare at them with her glazed square eyes. Hello my crew. What do you require? Atlas said with the same plain voice. Could you go help Colin over there or whatever, Brooke said. Of course crew member Brooke, Atlas said once more before rolling over to Colin. Colin was sobbing, holding his ears and hiding his face. Atlas ducked down and whispered to him multiple comforting words. Adam laughs quietly. Such a baby he is, Adam whispered tauntingly to Brooke. Oh hush you kangaroo boxer. She rolled her eyes at him as he gasped in offense. Altos grabbed earplugs from a supplies compartment and used her arm that was hidden on her sides to give them to Colin. Colin stared for a long moment before taking them and putting the earplugs in his ears. Thank you Atlas. He muttered softly. Of course crew member Colin, Atlas said. Does this ship have a bathroom? Adam said but was interrupted by a small bang on the bottom right of the ship before Brooke laughed slightly. Ha! You got interrupted. She smirked before walking to where the noise was and examining it. What happened Adam asked as Brooke shrugged. Didn't see anything. Must have been space sounds. She smiled. Now how about getting us to Mars, Mr. Kangaroo Boxer? Brooke teased as Adam glared before walking back into his seat and beginning to navigate the ship. Brooke and Colin sat back down in their seats and Atlas sat in her charging corner. Colin and Brooke talked about how the landing would be while Adam made some rude comments on some of the things they said. The conflicts between Brooke and Adam somewhat cooled down for the rest of the flight and everything was going smoothly until a small meteor hit the bottom right-hand part of the ship. However, it went unnoticed by the crew. Chapter 5, Shaky Arrival on the Red Planet. Brooke noticed the ship was shaking a bit, so she looked out a window to investigate. There she saw it. Mars was getting bigger by the second as she squealed and ran to her seat. Guys! Prepare for landing, she shouted as Colin and Adam got themselves seated while Altos went back to her corner. After a moment Adam flinched as they hit the ground and somewhat slid before going to a stop. They were now on Mars. Colin blinked before cheering. Just as he did this the power went out and everything was quite dark. Brooke, is this supposed to happen? Adam muttered as Brooke shook her head. No, it's not, but I will fix it. I'll be back soon. Brooke stood and got ready to exit the ship, opening the hatch and climbing out. She looked around in awe before shaking herself slightly to get back on task. Brooke walked around the ship for a moment before finding the outside control panel. She fixed the misconnected wires and closed the panel, quickly getting back inside and seeing the power on. There we go. The power is on. Can I get a thanks? Brooke said proudly. Sure Ms. Incredible, Adam joked as Brooke glared at him hardly. Atlas came from her corner and stared at Adam. Commander Adam, I suggest we start exploring our area around, she said coolly as Adam nodded. Yes. Let's do that so I don't have to talk with Ms. Incredible, Adam laughed before fixing himself up and going outside with Atlas. After a bit of walking they came upon a large cliff. Adam spots a small gleam of light that seems like it came from something metal down there. Atlas, do you see that down there? Adam said as Atlas peered over the edge. Yes I do Commander Adam, she said, I think we should go get it. Set a marker for this area so we can go get Brooke to help us, Adam stated as Atlas set a hologram marker in the spot before following Adam as he walked away. After a little while Adam, Brooke, and Atlas were at the area with a ladder and bag. You sure that is metal down there Adam? Brooke questioned. Positive that I've found something down there. He smiled before taking the ladder and throwing it down, tying it to a very strong looking rock before climbing down it with Brooke. Atlas stayed at the top to make sure the ladder was steady and straight. Brooke and Adam looked around for a moment before finding a glint of light and digging it up to reveal a few pieces of metal. Ha! See, we found something. Adam smirked and gathered up the pieces with Brooke's help. What do you think it is? Brooke asked. I dunno. Maybe Colin can figure it out. Adam and Brooke climb back up the ladder with the 2 pieces and leave the rope there. The 3 go back to the ship and give the 2 pieces to Colin. Give this a look, will you? Adam said as Colin nodded and took the metal, fixing and examining it. Hey. I think this is the Sojourner rover that landed on Mars in 1997. I bet that's why it's so broken and beat up. Colin smiled as he went back to cleaning and fixing the rover. Adam rolled his eyes before sitting down and resting for a bit. Brooke watched Colin work on the small rover. Chapter 6, Awakening of Sojourner. The crew brought Sojourner to the ship where they studied and fixed and activated it, which allowed the rover to talk. Colin activated the rover by inserting a chip into it, but Atlas got bad vibes about it and told Adam, I don't trust this new rover, she whispered to Adam as he rolled his eyes. Sojourner is the name, I think. It's small. What harm can it do? Adam replied before turning to the smaller rover and asking it multiple questions. Colin stared in awe at Sojourner. So you're like 61 years old? He questioned as it nodded with its newly added cylindrical head, which was an innovation by Colin to the original 1997 design. I have come from 1997, it said coolly as Brooke gave it a side eye and thought to herself, what a weird head it has. I think it was better without one. After a bit all the crew's questions were answered and Sojourner rolled into Atlas's charging corner as she stared at it with anger in those dark eyes. Atlas. Would you come outside with me to collect soil samples? It's mostly the reason we're here, Colin said to Atlas as she slowly turned to the door, glancing to make sure Colin was following her outside with a few small sample collection buckets. Colin started to lead before stopping and crouching down to the ground, digging into the sandy, red dirt and putting samples into the buckets as Atlas observed. Wonder if this would actually work for plants. He muttered to himself before standing and turning to Atlas. I've collected our samples. Let's go back to the ship, he said with delight before walking toward the ship with Atlas rolling at his side. The 2 soon got there and Colin gently set the sample collections onto his desk, then slightly yawned. He glanced around and saw Brooke and Adam were already asleep. Atlas rolled over to her corner and stared at Sojourner before rolling over to a different corner and deactivating itself there. Colin watched before walking over to his sleeping pod and laying down in it, closing his eyes and peacefully drifting off into sleep. Chapter 7, The Mars Panic. Sojourner slowly looked around and began rolling around the ship and examining the area before rolling over to Atlas and forcefully opening her control panel, then breaking it to make sure Atlas wouldn't wake up until fixed. Adam groaned and rolled on his side, hearing something somewhere in the ship, so he got up and yawned before walking over to investigate the sound. He rubbed his eyes before staring at Sojourner. Hey little buddy. What are you doing? He questioned, staring at it as the small rover turned to him. Just helping Atlas with something. Say. I need help with something outside and I would love your help, Commander Adam, it said slyly as Adam shrugged and nodded. Sure mate. What you need out there? He asked and blinked at it as it stared at him. I need to collect samples out there and can't wait for Colin. You have to come. It turned and rolled over to the exit, looking behind to see Adam following. The 2 got outside as Adam looked around and crouched to the ground. Would this soil do? He gasped as he felt something get cut behind him on his suit, turning quickly to see Sojourner cutting his oxygen supply off. Adam started to gasp and sprinted toward the ship, feeling something cut his leg before falling and turning to stare at Sojourner. What are you doing? Adam gasped as Sojourner spun in joy. I'm getting rid of you. It started to slowly but surely push him away from the ship and into the distance with Adam crying. Brooke slowly sat up and stretched, standing and walking over to Atlas and staring. What? Atlas? She bent down and fixed her control panel, activating her. Atlas looked around, spinning in circles. Where is Sojourner? What did it do? I swear. It did something, I promise you, Atlas gasped slightly as Brooke patted her back. Calm down and speak, Atlas. Atlas slowly nodded. Sojourner attacked me and Atlas was interrupted when she heard Colin shout, Where is Adam? Brooke gasped in shock before Atlas slowly turned to the door, knowing what happened and what she needed to do. Chapter 8, The Cosmic Fall. About 2 hours had passed and Atlas was rolling onto the red dirt that sent dust behind her. She knew where Sojourner had taken Adam and what she had to do. Brooke and Colin had stayed back at the ship to wait for her to collect Adam. Atlas slowed to a stop and saw Sojourner at the cliff where it was found before turning to Atlas. "Welcome, Atlas. You are too late to save Adam, so you might as well join him." Sojourner laughed coldly as Atlas let out a scream of fury and rushed at it. Sojourner dodged to the side and Atlas quickly stopped so she didn't fall off, turning and hitting Sojourner with her body, trying to get it under her wheels to crush it before it suddenly felt stronger as it pushed her to the edge. "Goodbye, Atlas. Into the red dirt you will rest forever," Sojourner said as Atlas stared before smacking Sojourner with her robotic arm and having both of them slip into the deep cliff. Atlas stared at the fading light, giving her last dying wish. She knew she couldn't have saved Adam, but she wished for Brooke and Colin to get out of this cruel place and get back to Earth safely. She closed her eyes as she hit the ground, total darkness. Sojourner didn't move, it lay there as something crawled from it and stared at Atlas, hissing in a deep, cold and cruel voice, "Perfect." It looked up before starting to climb up the cliff with crazy speed. Chapter 9, Escaping to the Stars. Brooke was fixing the ship before noticing a large hole in one of the rocket engines. She fixed it carefully before running back inside the ship. "Colin, we need to leave. We have everything needed and it's been hours since Atlas left," Brooke shouted as Colin reluctantly nodded. "But I don't know how to fly this ship," he whined as Brooke sat in the commander's seat. "Well, I do, and we have to leave now." She activated the engines and Colin sat down, frowning. Brooke glanced out the window and saw something running toward the ship. It looked super ugly and absolutely terrifying. She took a quick picture of it and didn't even check it. "Come on, come on, come on, come on." The ship rumbled before shooting off into the sky into space on its way back to Earth. Brooke gasped in shock and horror and Colin blinked as they exited the gravity of Mars. "Oh my," Brooke gasped. "Did you see that?" she asked Colin. "See what?" he asked, and she pointed to where she had taken the picture. It was somewhat blurry, but whatever was in it was ugly and horrifying. Colin stared in shock at the picture. "That's... oh my gosh. I'm going to have nightmares if we get back," he muttered. "Not if, Colin. We are going to get back. Okay?" She stared at him as he nodded. Yes. We will get back, of course. Let's just rest for now. Take a bit to calm down?" he asked. "Of course, Colin. We will tell Mission Control about Adam, Sojourner, and Atlas," Brooke promised as Colin leaned back and closed his eyes but did not fall asleep, just resting. They didn't talk the whole flight back to Earth. Chapter 10, The Final Shooting Stars. The spaceship was shaking as it approached Earth's orbit and was being pulled by it. Brooke did her best to keep the ship steady and to land somewhere near Florida so they could get to the Kennedy Space Center. "Hold on, Colin," Brooke yelled, and Colin hugged himself and got far in his seat, holding on for dear life. Brooke sighed as the parachute ejected and slowed their fall. Colin guessed it was about 4 hours until they hit the ground of the runway next to the Kennedy Space Center. Colin and Brooke were trembling before Brooke unbuckled and stood shakily. I think we've made it," she gasped and slowly opened the hatch, climbing out and staring at the scientists who had gathered around the ship. Colin also climbed out and hugged the ground tightly. The scientists looked behind them. "Are you Brooke and Colin?" one asked as Brooke nodded. "Why, yes, we are." She turned to see where the scientists were staring. She knew who they were waiting for. She knew that someone would never come. "Where are Commander Adam and Atlas?" another scientist asked. Colin shook his head and stared at them with grief. "Adam and Atlas are dead," Brooke said softly as some of the scientists gasped in horror. "How?" they shouted. "We don't know. Atlas went out to find Adam and didn't come back, and Adam went missing while we were sleeping." She looked down. "Can we just go back to our families for a bit?" She hugged herself slightly as the scientists nodded and took off their spacesuits. After an hour or two of being questioned, Colin and Brooke had to say goodbye. Colin stared at Brooke. "Hey. I know this is goodbye, but I think we had a decent mission." He smiled softly and Brooke sighed. "Sure, but Adam and Atlas." she muttered as Colin hugged her tightly. That's in the past, Brooke. Mission Control will sort it out and you and I can go back home. He smiled. It was really fun working with you and we might see each other again. Brooke hugged him back. I'll miss you. I hope we'll work together again, she said as Colin backed away and shook her hand before walking to the door. Bye, Brooke. He gave her a warm smile before walking out. Brooke watched him go before grabbing her stuff and also saying her goodbyes to the scientists and trainers before walking out. A few days later she had a flight back to Iceland and had landed, walking into her house and making a nice cup of hot chocolate with marshmallows and sitting down in her favorite seat as she started reading to the stars, Costa Rica in Nassau. Colin had walked into his house and greeted his brother and sister before petting the 3 cats they owned. Hello Bella, Mr. Fancy, and Coco. He smiled at the cats before hugging his brother and sister. I missed you so much, Anna and Henry. Anna giggled and grabbed Colin's hand. We have a gift for you, she said as she walked him to his room with Henry following behind. He looked around his room for a moment before seeing it. A huge 3D printer, it looked brand new and printed metal. Colin gasped and stared at it in awe before tearing up. I don't know what to say, thank you. Thank you so much, he gasped and hugged them both tightly, his siblings both laughing as their cats meowed and rubbed against their legs to get bedded. They all sat down and watched a movie while having the cats in their laps. Colin shoved popcorn in his mouth as the movie on the TV started. He was glad to be here but yet still sad for the ones who didn't make it home. He was wondering what Brooke was doing and if she was thinking about him. Colin sighed and looked out the window at the starry night, smiling softly before turning his attention back to the TV. He would most likely call Brooke later since he had her number. He was already thinking of writing a book. And that book's title was going to be Echoes on the Red Horizon. The end. Or is it?